MrBeast, The Rise and Trials of YouTube's Philanthropic King. In a modest bedroom in Greenville, North Carolina, a 13-year-old boy named Jimmy Donaldson sat hunched over his computer, obsessively analyzing YouTube videos frame by frame. While his peers played video games or hung out at the mall, Jimmy was conducting what he called experiments, uploading videos that no one watched, studying successful creators with the intensity of a scientist examining specimens under a microscope. Little did anyone know that this socially awkward teenager who struggled to make friends and often ate alone at lunch would eventually become the most powerful force on YouTube, commanding audiences larger than most television networks and wielding enough influence to change lives with a single video. But the path from Jimmy Donaldson to MrBeast, the philanthropic mastermind who gives away millions of dollars while building a business empire worth hundreds of millions, is littered with secrets, controversies, and sacrifices that few truly understand. The obsessive origins. James Stephen Donaldson was born on May 7, 1998, in Kansas before his family relocated to Greenville, North Carolina when he was still young. His childhood was marked by an almost unsettling level of focus that worried his parents. While other kids collected Pokemon cards or played sports, Jimmy collected data. Endless spreadsheets tracking view counts, engagement rates, and algorithmic patterns that governed YouTube's mysterious recommendation engine. His mother, Sue Donaldson, often found herself concerned about her son's single-minded devotion to what seemed like a hopeless dream. Jimmy would skip meals, ignore homework, and sacrifice sleep to chase his YouTube ambitions. The family dining table became a battleground where Sue pleaded with her son to consider a normal career path, while Jimmy insisted that YouTube was his destiny. The early years were brutal. Jimmy's first videos, uploaded when he was just 13, garnered embarrassingly low view counts. He experimented with gaming content, commentary videos, and random stunts, but nothing worked. For years, he was essentially shouting into the void, creating content for an audience that didn't exist. The psychological toll was immense, rejection after rejection, video after video, falling flat, friends and family questioning his sanity. What separated Jimmy from the millions of other aspiring YouTubers wasn't talent or charisma. It was an almost pathological refusal to quit. He studied successful creators like Casey Neistat PewDiePie and others with the dedication of a medical student. He would pause videos every few seconds, taking notes on everything from thumbnail design to pacing to the precise moments when viewers typically clicked away. The breakthrough algorithm. The turning point came when Jimmy was around 16, after he had been grinding for nearly 3 years with minimal success. He discovered what he calls the algorithm, not just YouTube's recommendation system, but a deeper understanding of what makes content spread like wildfire across the internet. This wasn't just about views. It was about creating content so engaging, so shareable, that it would force the algorithm to take notice. His breakthrough video was deceptively simple: counting to 100,000. Posted in 2017, the video showed Jimmy literally counting from 1 to 100,000, a process that took him over 40 hours to complete. The concept was absurd, almost stupid, but it worked. The video went viral, not because it was particularly entertaining, but because it was so audacious, so committed to its premise, that people couldn't help but share it. This success revealed something crucial about Jimmy's psychology. He was willing to endure extreme physical and mental discomfort for content. The counting video left him exhausted, his voice hoarse, his eyes bloodshot, but he had found his formula. Extreme dedication, pushing human limits, creating content that was less about entertainment and more about spectacle. The money revelation. As Jimmy's channel grew, he made a discovery that would define his entire career. He realized that the more money he spent on videos, the more money he made back. This wasn't just about production value, it was about stakes. Audiences were drawn to content where real money, real consequences, real lives were on the line. But here's where the story gets complicated. Jimmy's family wasn't wealthy. His early expensive videos were funded through a combination of sponsorships, reinvesting every penny he earned, and taking enormous financial risks that could have bankrupted him. There were months when he was spending more than he was making, betting everything on the next video's success. His mother, Sue, later admitted in interviews that she was terrified during this period. Jimmy would disappear for days at a time, working on elaborate video setups, spending money they didn't have pursuing what still seemed like a fantasy. The tension at home was palpable. His parents saw their son becoming consumed by something they didn't understand, sacrificing normal teenage experiences for an uncertain future. The team assembly. Success brought new challenges. Jimmy quickly realized he couldn't manage his growing empire alone. He began assembling what would become known as the Beast Crew, a tight-knit group of friends and collaborators who became the faces of his channel. Chris Tyson, Chandler Hollow, Carl Jacobs, and others joined what was essentially a startup disguised as a YouTube channel. But the dynamics weren't always smooth. Sources close to the operation describe a workplace culture that was simultaneously supportive and demanding. Jimmy's perfectionism and relentless work ethic created an environment where everyone was expected to match his intensity. Some thrived, others burned out. The pressure to constantly create bigger, more expensive, more spectacular content took its toll on everyone involved. Behind the scenes, Jimmy was developing what friends describe as an almost unhealthy relationship with success. He became addicted to metrics, constantly checking view counts, analyzing performance data, adjusting strategies based on real-time feedback. Sleep became optional. Social relationships outside of work became rare, and his entire identity merged with the MrBeast brand. The philanthropy strategy, the videos that truly launched Jimmy into the stratosphere, were his philanthropic stunts. Giving away cars, houses, and eventually millions of dollars, these videos created a new category of content that was part entertainment, part charity, part marketing genius. But the reality behind these seemingly spontaneous acts of generosity was far more calculated than audiences realized. Jimmy's philanthropy wasn't just about helping people, though. That was certainly a genuine motivation. It was a sophisticated understanding of viral mechanics. Giving away money created content that was inherently shareable, feel-good, and impossible to criticize. It positioned Jimmy as a force for good while generating massive revenue through sponsorships and merchandise sales. The financial mathematics were staggering. A video where Jimmy gave away $1 million might cost him that million-plus production expenses, but it would generate significantly more revenue through ad revenue sponsorship deals and increased subscriber counts that boosted his entire channel's earning potential. He had essentially weaponized generosity. However, this strategy created its own problems. Jimmy became trapped by audience expectations. Each philanthropic video had to be bigger than the last. The pressure to constantly escalate meant that what started as giving away hundreds of dollars evolved into giving away hundreds of thousands, then millions. The financial stakes became enormous, and the margin for error disappeared. The business empire. Behind the YouTube videos, Jimmy was quietly building a massive business empire. MrBeast Burger, launched in 2020, became one of the fastest-growing restaurant chains in American history, though it existed primarily as a delivery-only concept operating out of existing restaurant kitchens. Feastables, his chocolate brand, generated tens of millions in revenue within its first year. But these business ventures revealed another side of Jimmy's personality. Friends and former employees describe him as ruthlessly demanding when it came to business operations. The same perfectionism that made his videos successful made him a challenging boss. Multiple former employees have spoken anonymously about the pressure cooker environment, the constant pivots and changes, the expectation to work around the clock. The business empire also created conflicts of interest that Jimmy didn't always handle transparently. Videos promoting his own products weren't always clearly labeled as advertisements. The line between content and commerce became increasingly blurred, raising questions about whether audiences fully understood when they were being marketed to. The dark secrets. As Jimmy's fame grew, so did scrutiny of his operation. Former employees began speaking out about working conditions, describing a workplace culture that prioritized content creation over employee well-being. Some described working 80-hour weeks, being pressured to participate in videos they weren't comfortable with, and experiencing burnout that led to mental health issues. There were also questions about the authenticity of his videos. Multiple former employees alleged that some apparently spontaneous moments were scripted or staged, that some of the people featured in videos were actors rather than random participants, and that the seemingly effortless generosity involved extensive background research and planning that wasn't always disclosed to audiences. Perhaps most troubling were allegations about how participants in his videos were selected and treated. Some claimed that people featured in his philanthropic videos were required to sign extensive contracts that limited their ability to speak about their experiences. Others alleged that the life-changing gifts came with strings attached that weren't apparent to viewers. The relationships and personal life. Jimmy's romantic life remained largely private for years, which was remarkable given his massive public profile. He briefly dated Maddie Spadell, a social media influencer, but the relationship ended after about a year. Friends close to Jimmy describe him as someone who struggled to maintain relationships outside of work, partly because his entire life revolved around content creation. His relationship with his family also evolved in complex ways. His mother, Sue, eventually became supportive of his career, but there were years of tension and worry. His brother, CJ, occasionally appeared in videos, but largely stayed out of the spotlight. Jimmy's success provided financial security for his entire family, but it also created pressure and scrutiny that they hadn't asked for. The most significant relationship in Jimmy's life became his partnership with Chris Tyson, one of his original collaborators and closest friends. Chris appeared in hundreds of videos and became a beloved figure among MrBeast fans. However, their relationship would eventually become the source of Jimmy's biggest controversy, the Chris Tyson scandal. In 2023, Jimmy faced his most serious crisis when Chris Tyson became the center of a massive scandal. Chris, who had been married with a child, began a gender transition and came out as transgender. While Jimmy initially expressed support, the situation became complicated when allegations emerged about Chris's inappropriate online interactions with minors. Screenshots surfaced showing Chris engaging in questionable conversations with underage fans. The allegations included sending inappropriate messages, sharing adult content, and using language that many found concerning given the power dynamic between a famous YouTuber and young fans. Jimmy's response to the crisis revealed both his loyalty to friends and his prioritization of business interests. Initially, he stood by Chris, but as the allegations mounted and the public relations nightmare intensified, Chris was quietly removed from MrBeast content. The handling of the situation drew criticism from multiple directions, with some arguing Jimmy acted too slowly, while others claimed he abandoned a friend in crisis. The scandal highlighted uncomfortable questions about MrBeast's audience demographics. While Jimmy's content was ostensibly family-friendly, much of his audience consisted of children and teenagers. The Chris situation forced a reckoning with the responsibilities that came with that influence. The Beast Games controversy. Jimmy's ambitions eventually led him to traditional media, with Beast Games, a reality competition show for Amazon Prime Video with a $100 million budget. However, the production became another source of controversy when reports emerged about poor conditions for contestants. Participants in the show alleged inadequate food, medical care, and living conditions during filming. Some claimed they were given insufficient meals, had limited access to medications, and were housed in uncomfortable conditions for extended periods. The allegations painted a picture of a production more concerned with spectacle than participant welfare. The controversy was particularly damaging because it contradicted Jimmy's carefully crafted image as someone who cared about people. The disconnect between his philanthropic YouTube persona and the alleged treatment of Beast Games contestants created cognitive dissonance among fans and critics alike. The algorithm addiction. Throughout his rise, Jimmy developed what can only be described as an addiction to the algorithm. Every decision from video topics to thumbnail designs to upload schedules was driven by data and optimization. This approach made him incredibly successful, but also created a prison of his own making. Friends described Jimmy as someone who couldn't enjoy normal experiences because he was constantly thinking about how they could be turned into content. Vacations became location scouting trips. Conversations with friends became brainstorming sessions. His entire worldview became filtered through the lens of what would perform well on YouTube. This algorithmic thinking extended to his personal relationships. Some former friends allege that Jimmy evaluated people based on their potential value to his content empire. Friendships were maintained or discarded based on their utility to the MrBeast brand. The line between genuine connection and business partnership became increasingly blurred. The philanthropic questions. While Jimmy's charitable work has helped thousands of people, it has also raised complex questions about the nature of philanthropy in the social media age. Critics argue that turning charity into entertainment commodifies human suffering and creates perverse incentives. The most troubling questions center around selection and sustainability. How were recipients of Jimmy's generosity chosen? What happened to them after the cameras stopped rolling? Did the life-changing gifts actually change lives, or did they create new problems? Investigative reports revealed that some of Jimmy's philanthropic projects didn't have the lasting impact suggested by his videos. Wells built for communities sometimes fell into disrepair. Houses given to families sometimes came with tax implications that recipients couldn't afford. The complexity of real charitable work didn't always translate well to viral video content. The mental health toll. Behind the success, Jimmy's mental health struggles became increasingly apparent to those close to him. The pressure to constantly create bigger and better content, combined with the weight of managing a massive business empire and public persona, took a significant toll. Sources close to Jimmy describe periods of extreme stress-anxiety attacks related to video performance and a growing isolation from normal life experiences. His success had created a golden cage where everything he did was scrutinized, analyzed, and monetized. The paradox of Jimmy's situation became clear. He had achieved everything he had dreamed of as a 13-year-old obsessing over YouTube in his bedroom, but the achievement came with costs he hadn't anticipated. The algorithm that had made him successful had also consumed his life. The legacy question. As Jimmy approaches his mid-20s, questions about his legacy become increasingly relevant. He has fundamentally changed how content is created and consumed on YouTube. His influence on a generation of creators is undeniable. His business innovations have created new models for digital entrepreneurship, but the costs of that influence are still being calculated. The scandals, controversies, and questions about authenticity have tarnished what was once a pristine public image. The pressure to constantly escalate has created an unsustainable trajectory that must eventually reach its limits. Perhaps most significantly, Jimmy's story represents something larger about our current moment. He embodies both the incredible opportunities and the psychological costs of internet fame. His success demonstrates what's possible when talent meets obsession and algorithmic understanding, but it also reveals the human toll of turning every aspect of life into content. The current reality. Today, Jimmy Donaldson stands as one of the most influential people on the internet, commanding an audience of hundreds of millions and generating revenue that rivals major corporations. But he also represents the complexities and contradictions of modern digital celebrity. His story is simultaneously inspiring and cautionary. The 13-year-old who refused to give up on his YouTube dreams achieved success beyond his wildest imagination. But that success came with sacrifices and controversies that continue to shape his legacy. The transformation from Jimmy Donaldson to MrBeast reveals something profound about ambition, creativity, and the price of viral fame. It's a story that continues to unfold with each new video, each new scandal, each new milestone, adding complexity to a narrative that began with a lonely teenager obsessing over YouTube algorithms in his bedroom in North Carolina. Whether MrBeast's story ultimately represents triumph or tragedy may depend on what happens next. The boy who mastered the algorithm must now grapple with the human cost of that mastery, and the world watches to see whether the king of YouTube can find a way to be human again.